This is going to be a video on diagnosing and repairing a issue that I expect to be pretty common with the Dainese smart jackets, the full jackets. This is the Smart Jacket LS Sport, purchased in 2024. This probably applies to some other model jackets. I believe this specific one is being discontinued now, but this probably will apply to any of the full smart jackets with the airbag and the jackets that turn on with the closure of the switch up here. So the issue that I'm having with this jacket is that it does not turn on when the clasp is closed. If you didn't know, the way this jacket turns on is by closing a connection between these two buttons right here. These buttons have wires on the back side of them. On the inside of this end of the buttons, there's just a metal switch between this link between these two, and when you close it, it just closes this connection, tells the computer that this thing is clasped, and that's what turns it on. So right now, as you can see, when the connection is closed and it's clasped, did not turn on. This is an issue that I had once after washing this jacket. It says not to tumble dry it. I did against the instructions, and one of the wires on the back side of one of these buttons broke. I repaired it because I didn't feel like dealing with Dainese warranty support. If you ever have had the misfortune of doing that, I'm sorry. They're terrible. They take about a week to reply to each email individually. Anyway, the second time it happened was just from regular riding. The wires that they have connecting the back of these buttons is very thin. It's probably 22 gauge or smaller, slightly smaller perhaps. I'm going to be replacing it with some better connectors, some thicker wire, and hopefully that'll be a permanent solution to the issue. So one way you can troubleshoot this and make sure that this is your actual issue is going to be first plug it in with your regular charging cord that came with the jacket, which is important. It must be the one that came with the jacket. Plug that in. If it charges okay and turns on okay with the jacket plugged in, then you'll know that this is probably the next check you need to do. So what you're going to want to do is open the jacket up. You're going to want to pull out the connections that are back here underneath the inside flap. So inside here, it's helpful to pull all this back. The bottom of the airbag has a little clip that holds it on. If you unclip that, then all your electronics are right here. You can undo the Velcro, which has all the connectors on this side. Pull them all out. Now there are a bunch of these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right here alone. The one that we're looking for is going to be 2 wires. So you have one with 2 wires here, one with 2 wires there, one with 2 wires there, one with 2 wires there. So 4 have 2 wires. One is a larger connector with 4 wires. So we're looking for one that has 2 wires. And this jacket model specifically, it has a green and a white wire running to it, and the other side is black to black. You can trace this wire in particular because it actually goes up the inside of the jacket up to the buttons. So this is the male side of the button, and what you're going to want to do is kind of feel up the inside of the jacket. So on this side, make sure you're looking at the correct side that I just pointed to. On the inside, this is one of the airbag CO2 modules right here. And so running up along this side of the jacket, we have this little extra fabric right here. This is the fabric sheath that the wire runs through to get up to those buttons. And so what you can do is pull on each of these wires until you find the correct one. You can lift this extra fabric out and you have a little bit of extra wire here. So what you can do is pull that wire and see which one pulls. As you can see here, this is the wire that we're looking for right here. So the wire coming from up in those buttons is black colored, and then it comes to this connector, and then from this connector it goes to the electronic module that controls everything, and the wires coming from that end are green and white. What you're going to want to do is disconnect this connector. So now we have, these are the black wires that run up to the buttons. This one has, it seems like some kind of a date code. It has 39/2021, so maybe the 39th month of, or week of 2021 perhaps, or something. I'm not going to use that side for right now. We're going to use the female side of the connector. This is the side that runs directly into the computer module that's right here. If you bought your jacket new, you should recognize this. I received two with my jacket and didn't know what they were for the longest time until it came time to fix this, and then I deduced what they were for. It's actually a jumper wire. So as you can see, this is a male end of this connector, the same male end that's actually coming from those buttons up at the top of the jacket. And they included this probably for troubleshooting, although they didn't tell you in the user manual. This is just a wire that goes from one pin to the other pin. So when you install this, what it's going to do is close that connection, just as if you were closing the connection up at the top where the buttons are. So as you plug this in, I'm going to show you the indicator light on the jacket here. I'm going to plug in the connector now. So that's the regular starting flashing system check that the jacket normally does. Right now you can see it's solid blue, which means that it's on standby mode. So we know now that the buttons up at the top of the jacket are the culprit. I'm going to unplug this jumper, and you'll see the jacket turn off normally. So at this point, you know that those buttons up there are the problem with the jacket. What I'm going to do now is try to get a good vantage point of the inside of those buttons so I can show you the wires that are broken. It's a little bit difficult to do. I'm going to show you my process, and hopefully you can repeat it so you can kind of get your hand up there and be able to flip the jacket inside out, which is not easy, but it is possible. There is some room to do it. So we have this stuff, this airbag disconnected at the bottom. I'm going to disconnect the adjustable kind of belly bands here on the sides. I'm going to continue to flip the jacket up, or the airbag up inside the jacket. We have two more buttons that hold on the fabric connected to the airbag up top here. So I'm going to disconnect both of those on the sides. I have a little bit more room to play with. Now the trick is to use this extra piece of fabric that I was looking at earlier, which has the wires going up to the button. If you follow that piece of fabric, you can follow where the wires are going, and you can get your hand up in there. So I flipped the jacket, continuing to follow that. At this point, that extra fabric comes up to a small hole right here. That's a little too small to be able to get into with your hand. So what I'm going to do is go in this small hole, well, it's a larger hole, right beside it. And this is a hole in the fabric, which is right on top of the outside of one of the shoulder pads. This may take you a minute to find, but it's a larger hole. It's large enough to get your hand in. Right now my hand is kind of cradling the outside of one of the shoulder pads. On the other side of the jacket, feel where this side of the buttons are, and you can guide your way there with your other hand. My other hand is right there where the buttons are. At this point, you can flip the jacket in this area inside out, and there's your wires. There's the outside of the button, the inside of the button rather. Right here you can see a previous repair that I made. The wire had broken, and they're crimped into the back of the button right here. This is a specialty button that I couldn't find anywhere, so I'm going to show you later what we're going to do to fix that. I stripped back some of the wire and managed to crimp it back into this crimp connector, but it's a little janky. As you can see, it has stood up. Seems pretty secure. This wire is very thin, as I mentioned earlier, and so I don't think it's good for a long-term repair. The other button here is going to be difficult to see, but the wire has just completely snapped. It has some heat shrink wrap holding it on still, but I'll show you right now. It's just completely fallen apart. So what I'm going to do now is remove this wire set. I have already made up a new set of wires. I'm going to trim them to length, and I'll give you a little glimpse into the new wire setup here. As I mentioned, those special buttons are either not available publicly or I couldn't find them. Trust me, I spent a long time looking. So the solution I came up with is using regular snaps. And a ring terminal pressed between the snaps and the fabric. So eventually it will look something like this. This is the male side of the button, the part that's on the outside of the jacket. On the inside of the jacket, we have the other part of the button, and then sandwiched between that inside part of the button and the inside of the fabric, we'll have the ring terminal sitting. All this is squeezed together, and if we connect the wire to this ring terminal, then we'll have a positive signal going through the buttons, just as they were before, but with a little bit less specialized equipment. As I mentioned earlier, your jacket, like mine, should have come with 2 of those jumper connectors, the male ends. What I've done with one is cut that jumper wire in half. Since I'm going to be using thicker gauge wire, as you can see, the new wire I'm using is 18 gauge. The old wire is probably 22 or smaller. I'm not sure that this size wire would have fit into this connector, and so I simply spliced it and soldered it, covered it with heat shrink wrap. So this is a good solid connection here, very solid. I have all of this wire going. This will be cut to size. After I've cut it to size, I'm going to install the ring terminals onto this new wire. Then what I will do is install the buttons with the ring terminal, set the buttons, and then I'll be good to go. The button size is known as line 20 or size 20. Also can be known as 1/2 inch snap. It was difficult for me to find in a store nearby. Even all the craft stores, they only had larger snaps. Some were 9/16 of an inch, some were 5/8, and there were larger and larger ones. I ended up having to order some online. I purchased some from McMaster-Carr because they were really cheap, and McMaster-Carr is a great source. If you need the part number for these, it is 95690 Alpha 431. And this is a brass oxide snap, which means that it's made out of brass, but it has that black coating. That's what's on the jacket already. Alright, so from this point, I have my new wires made up, but I need to cut them to length. In order to get them up to the correct spot where the buttons are, I'm going to use the old wires to pull them up, because it's very difficult to push the wires through that thin fabric that runs from the bottom of the computer all the way up to the top of the buttons. So in order to do that, I'm going to use the section of the wires at the bottom. That's the side that has the male connector here. So what I'm going to do is attempt to tie these onto this section here and pull them up. Try to make this knot at the connector as tight as possible so that it can slip through the jacket easily. So from here, this is the bottom of the jacket where all the connectors are. It kind of goes, the wires go on the back side or the inside of this mesh right here underneath the computer. So once I have that connected, I'm going to follow this up again to that same hole. I'm going to get my hand on the inside of those buttons and try to flip it inside out now. Alright, now I see one of the wires, the other one has ripped. So what I'm going to do is try to pull this one wire through the top of the jacket. I found the other side of the wire, and I'm going to pull these through, and it might take a while. I'm going to try not to break these wires as I'm pulling them up. I'll be right back with you. At this point, the new wire has made it up to this section, the section where that extra fabric starts. The hole here for the wires is very small, so I'm going to have to enlarge that a bit to fit the wires through. At this point, I've gotten the new wires all the way up to the top of the jacket where the extra fabric strip ends, right near the shoulder pad. So at this point, I can disconnect it from the old wires. And at this point, pull some extra cord through here. This is the new wire here. I'm going to come to the inside of the jacket, where the inside of the buttons are, right here. I'm going to pull off that wire. That's the old wire gone. This is the wire that went from the buttons, this end, down to the computer, this end. Could save this because it does have one of those male connectors on there. Never know when you might use it. So from here, before we can install our new buttons and the new wires, I'm going to remove these buttons from the jacket. I'm going to flip everything right side in again, showing the buttons here. If you don't know how these kinds of snaps are held on, there's a centerpiece that is driven up and then swaged out, and it holds the two sections together. So if you look at this button, this snap, excuse me, has two pieces that have yet to be put together. This is the part, this wider part goes on the outside. The skinnier part goes on the inside of the jacket, the inside of the fabric. This part goes up into the larger size and it protrudes a little bit. You put a tool on it and you swage it down. And so this the smaller inner post, that's what this is called, the post and the stud. The smaller post just has to be drilled. Once it's drilled, the top portion that's actually holding the snap together, the button will just come apart. So I'm going to do that now on these buttons. For drilling into this post, you really want a drill bit that is no wider than the post itself. In this situation, I have a 1/8 inch drill bit. You should be able to use it for your studs, which are the same size. So on the other side of this, we have part of the airbag, which I really don't want to damage. So I'm going to pull the airbag away from this section of the fabric with the buttons, and I'm going to lay down something hard underneath the back of the fabric where the buttons are, making sure that the airbag is off to the side so that it doesn't get affected by any of this. Something hard and flat, and I'm going to drill just into that center post. Button's already starting to spin. I'm going to wiggle the drill bit around just to make sure I get all of that material holding the post onto the stud. There you go. There's the stud removed, and on the inside, the post will be. I'll do the same thing with the other button here. That's the stud removed. I will go back into the inside of the jacket and remove the post from those buttons. There they are, 1 and 2. So I'm only now realizing that they did not have some special buttons that had the crimp connector already installed. They did the exact same thing that I'm about to do to repair it, which is put a ring terminal between the post and the inside of the fabric. The only difference is that I'm going to be using larger materials so that they'll be stronger. So from here, these are my wires. I want to make sure that I cut them to the right length, and if anything, I want them a little bit longer so that they don't pull. As you pull the wires through, the material that it comes through, the extra fabric that we were talking about earlier, kind of bunches up. So I'm going to flip the jacket, kind of loosely put it all back together, and make sure that the wire is extended to its full length that it will be during use. So to do that, I'm going to pull the jacket out. If you haven't already, you can connect it down at the bottom of the jacket into that 2-wire connector that has the green and white connector. Connect it in there. Leave a little bit of extra wire. And I'm just going to pull on this whole side of the jacket so that I know it's extended. All right. At that point, we should have a pretty good idea of our length for the wire. So I can flip it back inside out. I'm going to go up to that section of the jacket, pull it inside out like we've been doing. I'm going to pull my wires out, the new wires. Pull the wires out the top. I found one, but where's the other? There's the other. All right. At this point, you won't have any buttons in the jacket to show you the specific spot, but I just have to find the holes. So this is where the buttons are going through right here. You see that one hole there and the other hole up here. They're more like rips through the fabric. They didn't seal them with heat or anything. So it'll have to be a little bit, it'll be a little bit finicky to get the new buttons, the new studs set up in there. So at this point, what I want to do is trim this extra wire off. Then I'm going to install my new ring terminals, and then we'll get the buttons installed. So from here, the buttons are going to be right here. So I'm going to trim off a good 4 or 5 inches of this wire, just so we don't have any extra. Alright, with the wires trimmed, I'm going to strip them. From here we can connect the ring terminals. One thing to note, if you have a heat shrink ring terminal like this one, you just want to make sure to cut off any of the heat shrink that touches the ring up here and may interfere with the connection between the two parts of the button. If you'll notice, I have not trimmed this one yet. I will put it through here. This is what we're going to do to install it onto the jacket. It's going to go between these two sections of the button, and you see they don't sit flat because the heat shrink section is already in the way. On this connector, I've trimmed back the heat shrink so that the button will sit flush and make good contact. I'm going to trim this one right here. This one is trimmed. Let's see if it's got enough clearance. Yes, it does. That will sit flat. All right. At this point, you can install your ring terminals. I'm going to pull on them to make sure it's a good connection, because we don't want to have to go through all this again. And the idea is to make this a little stronger than Dainese did, which did not hold up very well. Both of those connections seem secure. I'm going to shrink these down because these have heat shrink terminals. If you didn't just hear, when I touch these together, since the wire is now connected, it's turning on the jacket. So I'm going to actually disconnect it just from the bottom down here, just to not have to deal with that. I'm going to heat shrink these and I'll be right back. Okay, my connections have been heat shrunk. I would highly recommend heat shrink connectors because they actually have an adhesive on the inside of the heat shrink, and so as it shrinks, it'll glue itself to the wire, the outside of the wire, and it's just a little extra security holding the wire into that ring connector there. So at this point, the only thing left to do is to connect the button through this. These connectors have one side that's kind of flat and one side where the crimp connector pokes through. So if you can see, this is the flat side of the connector, and we want the flat side to go towards the outside of the jacket so that this side of the wire is not rubbing up against the fabric as much. Remember, flat side of the connector out. I'm going to do my best while holding one of the connectors here. I'm going to find where those buttons are supposed to sit with my hand. And I'm going to flip it inside out. I'm going to go for this bottom hole first. Flat side of the connector out. I want to take the smaller part of the snap, which is called the post. I'm going to stick it through the ring terminal, and I'm going to put the post up against the fabric. And on the other side, I'm going to try to feel my way through. There's several layers of fabric here, and so I'm going to try to line up all the holes to get the post to go through the outside of the fabric. I can feel it in there, but it feels like it's going to take some finagling to get it to poke through. And there it is. Just barely. Alright, once I've got the post sticking through, which I'm not going to be able to show you really, unfortunately. I'm going to set the stud on top of it. At this point, you should have a little bit of the post sticking up through the stud. And now this is going to be a little bit of a difficult part, because we have to keep the two sides of the snap together while we set it. So I'm going to think of how to do this. Let's see here. This is going to require a tool, by the way. Looks like this. And for this side of the snap, you don't really need this. This is for the other side of the snap, but you can use the back side of this or any flat piece of hard metal. And that's just going to be sitting on the back of the stud. And this part goes into on the back side of the post, rather. This goes into the stud and peens over the top of the post. I'm going to attempt this first one by myself and then let you in on watching the second. Alright, it was a bit tricky, but I've set the first button. You want to make sure to set it tight enough to where this ring terminal does not spin. That means you're going to have a good connection up against there. Now I'm going to try the next one and hopefully show you my methodology. So on this side of the jacket, the inside, you want the wires to be going up into the extra fabric that they're coming out of, so that they're not bending at an extreme angle. Remember, the flat side is to the outside, flat side of the ring connector out. I'm putting the stud through the ring terminal and I'm getting it lined up through that first bit of fabric, through that first layer on the inside. And I'm going to keep my finger on the back side of that, flip everything again. I'm going to come to the outside with my other hand and attempt to line up all those holes. There we go. As you can see there, probably not. As you can probably not see, that is now lined up. So now the post is sticking through. What I want to do is keep it held in place on that strip of fabric. Holding on the outside of both sides of the fabric. This whole operation was a lot easier to do after removing the shoulder pad. Just a tip for you. So now from here, the stud has to go over the post. There should be a little bit of material from the stud poking through, from the post poking through the stud. If there is, then you can go ahead and try to set it. So you're gonna need something hard. I have this big piece of steel here, and I'm gonna set this whole assembly down on top of the piece of steel. It's gonna be the fabric, the inside of the jacket basically up against the steel, and then the outside is gonna get hammered into place. So I'm gonna maneuver the jacket to where it allows me to do this, to set this down on a piece of steel. I'm gonna hold everything into place, use that tool, and you want to try to hold the stud down, make sure the stud is staying down against the fabric. This would be helpful to have an extra set of hands for, but from here, I'm going to hammer home that stud. Excuse me, that post. I keep mixing those up. It's pretty difficult. You're going to want to rotate the tool around, kind of spin it around. You can use light taps to get it started, and then heavier taps to set it nice and hard, nice and tight, so that the snap is tight and the ring terminal cannot spin. Let's go in and check that out from the inside. That was the top one we just did. So that wire is more or less pointing in that same direction into that extra fabric there. And the ring terminal is spinning a little bit. So I'm going to set that snap back down on here and hammer it home a little bit harder. I'm going to feel that ring terminal from the outside and make sure I can't spin it. Now it doesn't want to spin. So all the wires are connected now, except for the one at the bottom that I disconnected earlier. So at this point, I'm going to take that male end of the wire that I fabricated, plug it back in. Now everything is connected. It's not, the jacket's all not back together yet, but have a little moment of truth here. Connect these snaps and see if everything works. Did not work. Oh, there it goes. What I don't know is why it went into green mode right there. Let's see. Let's disconnect it. And I'm going to connect it again. Maybe it was just a little confused or something. Okay. Went into standby mode. It's disconnected. Just test it a third time. Seems to be working okay now. I don't remember the jacket with the original wiring having the little bit of delay to turn on when the snaps close, but perhaps that's just the thicker wire, slight increase in impedance or something like that. It does seem to be working correctly, and so I call that a good repair. It's a lot stronger than the original. You can go back and make sure that everything's buttoned up, everything that you disassembled. Make sure that you strap your airbag and everything back in correctly, same way it was taken out. And good luck. Let me know if you have any questions. Tried to cover everything as best as I could. So good luck to you.